Hey everyone, this is B Ryan Crime TV. I'm Brian. Last time we talked about the police needed solid evidence to calm public opinion. Remember earlier we mentioned police found a bloody handprint on the pillow under Kercher's body. It was collected and entered into the computer and immediately matched a person with a criminal record named Guede. After the murder, he fled to Germany, where he was arrested. Rudy Guede, born in 1986, 21 years old, from the Ivory Coast. He left his mother at 5 to join his father in Italy. His father was a bricklayer, lazy, with many wives. Not wanting to live with multiple stepmothers, Guede ran away from home. At 17, his father returned to the Ivory Coast, and he was taken in by a wealthy local businessman in Perugia. But Guede didn't appreciate his good fortune. He was lazy, hated studying, and lied constantly. Petty theft, dealing contraband. He was frequently arrested. 3 years later, the businessman decided he was beyond help and abandoned him. Guede's usual method was throw a rock to break a window. If someone answered, the place was occupied, and he'd walk away. No answer, he'd break in. 4 days before Kercher's murder, he was arrested in Milan for burglarizing a kindergarten. Milan police took his fingerprints and palm prints, then released him. It was this collection that linked him to the Kercher case. In the subsequent investigation, police found more evidence pointing to Guede. In Meredith's room, there were many bloody fingerprints and footprints matching Guede's, and his DNA was found in multiple places on Kercher's body. Also, the feces in the main bathroom toilet were his. On December 6, 2007, over a month after the murder, Guede was extradited to Italy. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he quickly confessed. However, he kept his story clean. Let's hear his version 1.20 testimony. I had met Kercher a few times before. On Halloween night, I recognized Kercher at a party, dressed as a vampire. I joked, "Do you want to suck my blood?" We flirted, and she invited me to her apartment the next night. The next day, I went to her apartment as promised. We met, flirted, but before anything could happen, I had an upset stomach. In the main bathroom, listening to music, using the toilet, I heard a scream. Scared, I ran out without pulling up my pants. I saw Kercher lying on the floor, covered in blood. Next to her stood a young blonde man. He was a bit shorter than me, wearing a tracksuit and a white hat. The light was too dim, and his back was to me, so I didn't see his face clearly. Before I could say anything, he spun around, holding a knife in one hand and a stick in the other, and charged at me. I instinctively ran but tripped on my loose pants. In that instant, I grabbed a nearby chair and held it in front of me. We faced off for a moment, then the man fled for some reason. As he left, he shouted, "Found the nigger, guilty as charged. Come on, let's go." I didn't have time to process the insult. I immediately checked on Kercher. She was stabbed in the neck, bleeding profusely. I grabbed some towels trying to stop the bleeding, but the towels were soaked and the blood kept flowing. I was terrified. I kept hearing noises outside the house. I was so scared I ran out without even closing the front door. I'm black, and I had blood on me. I was afraid no one would believe me. So after the murder, I fled to Germany to lay low. I don't remember if Kercher was still alive when I left, but I'm sure. When I left, she was fully dressed, lying on the floor. The glass window wasn't broken. Guede's testimony shifted all blame to an unknown blonde man, but police never found any trace of this person, even ignoring whether he existed. From what police knew, Guede wasn't telling the truth. Kercher and Guede barely knew each other. No one saw them interact on Halloween. Besides, Guede was definitely not Kercher's type, let alone having any interest. Later, when Guede's DNA was found inside Kercher, he changed his story, saying they did have sex, but it was consensual. No coercion. Of course, that wasn't convincing. But he did know details only someone at the scene would know, like the blood-soaked towels being from the small bathroom, proving he was there. Under police pressure, Guede gave version 2.0. The beginning was the same. While listening to music in the bathroom, he didn't hear a scream, but a doorbell. Then he heard Kercher arguing with someone. It sounded like Amanda. A few minutes later, he heard the scream. Then it was the same as version 1.0. A blonde man in a white hat was at the door. Version 2.0 implicated Amanda. But after meeting with his lawyer, he retracted version 2.0 and went back to version 1.0. But it didn't end there. After some time, he came up with version 3.0. He said he was lying in bed listening to music when Kercher was attacked. The music was so loud, he didn't even notice someone enter the room and attack Kercher. When he realized, he saw the blonde man. He chased after him but couldn't catch him. Then, looking out the window, he saw a female figure with blonde hair. He was sure it was Amanda. Version 14.0. The blonde man at the scene was Italian and looked like Raffaele. Now he had implicated both Amanda and Raffaele. It's worth noting that before Guede was arrested in Germany, police had been monitoring his phone and social media. A friend of Guede's at police direction tried to get him to talk. Guede said he didn't kill anyone, Amanda wasn't involved, and he wasn't at the scene. However, police believed Amanda was involved. On December 18, 2007, 47 days after the murder, police re-examined the crime scene using a luminol test. They collected 10 samples from areas that reacted to the test. Analysis showed 6 samples contained a mixture of Amanda's and Kercher's. These were found in the small bathroom, hallway, and Amanda's room. Not only that, 3 samples from the small bathroom showed clear blood reactions. Police speculated this was likely from Amanda cleaning up blood in the bathroom after the murder. Police believed this was solid evidence of Amanda's involvement. Combined with the knife found at Raffaele's apartment, a possible murder weapon, Amanda's DNA was found on the handle, and Kercher's DNA on the blade. With this double DNA knife, police could reasonably consider Amanda one of the killers. This also deepened suspicion of Raffaele, as the knife was found at his home. Furthermore, his DNA was found on a bra clasp at the scene. Raffaele explained that Kercher had visited his apartment, and while cooking, she accidentally cut her hand, so her DNA was on the knife. However, police verified that Kercher had never been to his apartment. Besides this physical evidence, police also found several witnesses. One witness was a driver. He said that between 10:03 and 11:15 p.m. on the night of the murder, his car broke down at the three-way intersection in front of the apartment. While waiting for a tow truck, he saw a blue car parked at the apartment's driveway entrance. Several boys came out from the side of the apartment. Raffaele's car was blue. Another was the prosecution's star witness, Curtolo. He claimed to have seen all 3 suspects on the night of the murder, and that he had a conflict with Raffaele that night. Amanda even pulled out a 16-inch knife and tried to stab him. At the time, Guede was standing at the apartment's main entrance. He had seen Amanda and Raffaele before the murder, so he couldn't have been mistaken. On July 11, 2008, after nearly a year of investigation, prosecutor Giuliano Mignini formally charged Amanda, Raffaele, and Guede with the murder of Kercher for an unknown motive, and 6 other charges, including sexual assault. Because this case was highly publicized, any small development was immediately picked up by the media, and the media is very good at focusing on sensational angles. This time, the spotlight was on Amanda. She was a perfect subject. She alone embodied many keywords: American female student, pretty, promiscuous, roommate murder, group sex, drug use, chaotic relationships, etc. The media found that any scandalous story about Amanda drove traffic every time. For example, the day after the murder, Amanda, with her apartment sealed off and no clean clothes, asked her boyfriend to take her to buy underwear. The media spun this into a headline story. Also, after Amanda's arrest, police falsely claimed she had AIDS to get her to list all her sexual partners for the investigation. This list was leaked to a reporter, leading to stories about Amanda's shocking promiscuity. Before any verdict, the media had already branded Amanda the mastermind of the murder, labeling her a cold-blooded maniac, a pervert, and a sex addict. Under the media frenzy, the victim and other suspects were ignored, and all eyes were on Amanda. The subsequent trial was also highly anticipated. It was even called the second most significant case. To capture the attention of both Europe and America since the O.J. Simpson trial, the media dubbed it the trial of the century in Italy. As the trial progressed, the focus shifted. The Italian justice system kept overturning its own verdicts, leading some to believe that relations between Italy, the US, and the UK affected the case's fairness. In December 2008, over a year after the murder, Guede opted for a fast-track trial. It was a closed-door trial with no press present. After reviewing key reports from both the prosecution and defense, the judge found him guilty of sexual assault and the murder of Kercher as an accomplice. He was sentenced to 30 years. After appeals, his sentence was reduced from 30 years to 16 years. Guede, the only person convicted in this case, after serving 13 years, was ruled by the court to be able to complete the remainder of his sentence through community service. He never confessed to the crime, nor did he ever clearly state that Amanda and Raffaele were responsible. But interestingly, he also refused to clear them of involvement. He remained ambiguous. Compared to the public trial of Amanda and Raffaele that followed, media attention on Guede's closed-door trial was negligible. This led to him being almost forgotten for a long time. On January 6, 2009, Amanda and Raffaele's trial for Kercher's murder began at the Assisi court in Perugia. It was a closed trial. Due to the large number of media, the court set up a press room with a live feed for the media to watch the proceedings. In this trial, prosecutor Mignini maintained that Kercher was killed because she refused a threesome with Amanda, Raffaele, and Guede. The prosecution's theory was that the night of the murder went like this. Amanda and Raffaele, in the heat of their new relationship, wanted excitement. They saw Guede, an acquaintance, in the square in front of the apartment. They invited him over for a threesome. The three got high on drugs. When Guede went to the bathroom, he saw Kercher's door ajar. Lusting after her, he went in and tried to force himself on her. Kercher's screams brought Amanda and Raffaele from the next room. But instead of stopping him, they joined in. Afterward, they staged a burglary. The next day, Amanda and Raffaele returned to the apartment to clean up evidence. The defense, however, argued that the prosecution's theory was pure nonsense. Guede was the sole killer. Amanda and Raffaele could not have selectively removed their traces from the scene, leaving only Guede's. Furthermore, they barely knew Guede. Amanda had only met him a few times, and Raffaele had never even seen him. There were no phone calls or texts between them. Their relationship was not close enough for a threesome. Both sides argued fiercely in court. The trial lasted nearly a year before a verdict was reached. On December 5, 2009, the Assisi court in Perugia ruled that the facts of the case were clear. The evidence was conclusive. 22-year-old Amanda and 25-year-old Raffaele were found guilty of staging the scene, slander, and murder. They were sentenced to 26 and 25 years in prison, respectively. On the day of the verdict, many TV stations in Italy, the US, and the UK covered the case extensively. Most people in Italy and the UK supported the guilty verdict. One Italian legal expert commented, "From an evidentiary standpoint, this is the simplest and fairest criminal trial one could imagine." But across the Atlantic, Americans didn't think so. They believed it was a complete miscarriage of justice, a wrongful conviction. The Italian side had heavily publicized Amanda's guilt before the trial, making people hate her. This hatred even turned into anti-American sentiment. Amanda was treated unfairly in the trial. Some American experts publicly criticized the DNA evidence used by the prosecution. Many American celebrities also spoke out for Amanda, including former US President Trump. He publicly stated that Amanda was innocent. His point was that Amanda should be released. There was no evidence linking her to the case. She just said some stupid things. After being interrogated for hours, "I think the president should get involved. I think people should boycott Italy. They shouldn't go to Italy." After the first trial, both Amanda and Raffaele appealed. 3 years after the murder, on November 24, 2010, the appeal trial began at the Perugia Court of Appeals. The defense challenged several key pieces of evidence and testimony from the first trial, requesting a re-examination. The court agreed. Upon review, many of the prosecution's so-called solid evidence was no longer solid. First, Raffaele's DNA was found on the metal clasp of Kercher's bra. The clasp was found 47 days after the murder, under a dirty carpet. Upon re-examination, besides Raffaele's DNA, The clasp also contained DNA from 2 unknown males and 1 female. Therefore, this evidence was likely contaminated. From the police video of the scene, the clasp was found over a meter away from its original position. The evidence collection was crude. They kicked down doors to enter the scene. Some investigators entered the scene without proper protective gear. They moved from room to room, rummaging through things without changing gloves. Some went to the balcony in protective suits, and after collecting evidence, they didn't store it properly. They piled a large amount of evidence together. The lab testing procedures were also problematic. Because there were so many samples from the scene, they worked continuously without stopping the machines. If the equipment and supplies weren't properly cleaned, sample contamination was highly likely. Later, some even suspected that the DNA on the clasp was fabricated. After all, the case was highly publicized. The police had claimed to have solved it, but couldn't produce evidence, fearing they couldn't close the case, so they fabricated evidence. Another piece of evidence related to Raffaele was a bloody footprint on the bath mat in the small bathroom. Initially, investigators mistakenly counted the second toe as the big toe, leading to incorrect measurements that matched Raffaele's. After the data was corrected, the defense argued the footprint was a better match for Guede. As for the solid evidence against Amanda, it was the double DNA knife found at Raffaele's apartment. Upon re-examination, Amanda's DNA was still found on the handle. That's not surprising. But Kercher's DNA was not found on the blade. In the initial test, the forensic team only found a very small amount of DNA, too little for a complete genetic analysis, and it couldn't be retested. Based on that small, incomplete DNA fragment, many people's DNA could match, not just Kercher's. Furthermore, the extraction and testing techniques used at the time were not the most advanced. So, concluding that Amanda killed Kercher based on this was very weak. Also, the size of this knife didn't match Kercher's wounds. The knife that left the bloody imprint at the scene was a size compatible with all of Kercher's wounds. Therefore, the defense argued there was only one murder weapon from start to finish, the one that left the bloody knife imprint at the scene. Unfortunately, that knife was never found. As for the 6 DNA mixtures of Amanda and Kercher found at the scene, they were also likely due to the investigators' unprofessional collection methods. 3 of the samples showed a blood reaction. This could also be contamination from investigators not wearing proper protection or from improper sample collection. From the police video of the scene, investigators were very sloppy when collecting samples from the small bathroom. They used cotton swabs to wipe large areas, collecting samples from the faucet, sink, toilet, wall, and bathtub without changing gloves. They even used the same swab for multiple locations. The small bathroom was shared by Amanda and Kercher. Not long before, Amanda had gotten her ears pierced in the small bathroom and bled, so finding 6 DNA mixtures of Amanda and Kercher doesn't prove Amanda was involved in the crime. Finally, the prosecution's witnesses were also unreliable. One said his car broke down in the first half of the night. While waiting for a tow, he saw a blue car parked at the apartment. But in reality, investigation showed his car broke down in the second half of the night. This time, discrepancy severely undermined his credibility. As for the prosecution's star witness, he claimed to have seen Amanda, Raffaele, and Guede at the time of the murder. He said he had seen Amanda and Raffaele before, so he couldn't be mistaken. He claimed to have seen Amanda and Raffaele together in July or August 2007. But in reality, Amanda didn't arrive in Italy until late September. She met Raffaele in late October, just a week before the murder. Furthermore, the defense found enough evidence to show that this star witness was a heavy drug addict. A few months after his first testimony, he was jailed for drug use. After that, his testimony became increasingly absurd and more detailed. He claimed to have seen Amanda arguing with 3 people at the apartment entrance, and he even confronted Guede. He saw Amanda and the others with a knife. His fantastical testimony lost the judge's trust. On October 3, 2011, the Perugia Court of Appeals announced that, after reviewing the disputed evidence, they found fundamental errors in the collection and analysis of many key pieces of evidence. The evidence was flawed. They acquitted Amanda and Raffaele of murder. However, Amanda was sentenced to 3 years for slandering bar owner Lumumba. Considering she had already served nearly 4 years, Amanda and Raffaele were released. Immediately after the verdict, Some Italian citizens outside the court, unhappy with the acquittal, were very emotional. They shouted profanities and insults at the judge. They believed Amanda was guilty. They thought the police's improper evidence collection and later testing invalidated the strongest evidence against the killer. Or perhaps, the court was under pressure from the US. There were rumors that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had pressured the Italian government. In March 2013, 6 years after the murder, the Italian Supreme Court overturned the acquittal of Amanda and Raffaele, ordering a retrial. Under Italian and US law, Italy could not force Amanda to appear in court. They could only request extradition after a conviction. In January 2014, the Perugia Court of Appeals issued its second verdict, again finding Amanda and Raffaele guilty. Amanda was sentenced to 28 years and 6 months. They appealed again, as expected. On March 27, 2015, nearly 8 years after the murder, the Italian Supreme Court again overturned the guilty verdict for Amanda and Raffaele, ruling that the murder charges were not proven. They deemed no further trial necessary, ending the proceedings. The reason was that no biological traces of them were found at the crime scene or on the victim, and no evidence showed they were present at the time of the murder. This final verdict brought the case to a close. This trial of the century, spanning nearly 8 years and involving 3 countries, came to an end. After the trial, Kercher's family said, "We are still searching for the truth. We may never know what happened that night. That's something we have to accept." As for whether Amanda and Raffaele were guilty, the questions never disappeared with the end of the trial. What do you think? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Alright, that's today's story. Please hit that like and subscribe button. It means a lot. I'm Brian. See you next time.